Here's the real reason why Gen Z doesn't want to work. Ugh, kids these days, they don't want a hard days of work at all. They just want to quit their jobs and be on social media all day long. Yeah, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. We want to quit because we're being taken advantage of, put in huge amounts of debt, and not paid properly. See, because while you were working in the 80s, your salary could actually afford you a decent lifestyle, but let me just show you the numbers. Since 1970, home prices have increased by 1,608%. If we compare minimum wages from then and now, in 2022, minimum wage is 40% lower than what it should be compared to 1970. But anyways, the same home that cost you $100,000 in 1970 costs you $710,000 now. All the while, wages have remained stagnant. Okay, sure, but that's just the way things are now. We had struggles too. Live with it. Yeah, kind of hard to live with it when college has increased by 2,000%. Tuition used to be $1,700 in 1970. And in 2020, it's about $38,000 a year. Follow for more.
I'ma sweat you out your motherfucking mom.
I am obsessed with this aspect of Gen Z's culture. Like, boomers lost their minds when millennials quit jobs over 3 to 5 years. Gen Z will quit tomorrow. They'll quit today. They'll quit 3 weeks from now. They'll quit in the middle of a shift. They'll quit yesterday. They'll quit 3 weeks ago and tell you in the middle of a shift. Gen Z collectively refuses to take crap from these horrible bosses so hard that they had to create a national myth that there's a labor shortage. There's not a labor shortage. There's a shortage of people willing to deal with their crap, and you have them on the run.
I cannot stand how the news has been dogging Gen Z and calling them lazy for not wanting to work a 9 to 5 for the rest of their lives. Let me put it in perspective for everybody who's a little confused here, okay? I work 5 days out of the week, 40 hours a week, okay? I do not make enough to live on my own. I would not make enough to pay rent, water, electric, and eat. 20 years ago when you were getting started, you could live on your own. 20 years ago when you first started, you were able to do everything that I am now struggling to do.
She's exactly right. She's totally and utterly right. And I think it's so important we genuinely listen to this message, because we have two groups of people now. 20 years ago, you worked hard. And again, look, this is my point. Don't start thinking this is us just slamming the generation above. You all worked hard, but you worked hard with hope. And what I mean by that is working hard's great if you're working towards something, a house, earnings, income, whatever it might be. As Gen Z, because everything is clipped, and I do mean everything, rent, food, bills, the full fucking lot, no chance of getting on the property matter. It's really hard to motivate yourself when you literally, it's at the end of the month, you go, I've done all this work for the month and I've got no more money than when I started. Like, it's really hard to work hard when you have no hope. And this is the situation we're heading toward. And it's something society has got to fix. And we've got to start listening to these younger generations, because they're not all lazy. Of course they're not. And anyone who gets caught saying that is a complete and utter mug. Genuinely, if we don't fix this, we're going to have such issues, because this generation is going to have to look after the generation above, don't forget, at some point. It's going to be our world at some point. And the fact we're giving them such an unfair starting point is just not acceptable. And people need to start listening to this, because it is going to cause systemic issues soon if people don't start getting on board.
To come in for an 8 a.m. meeting, my Gen Z new hire said, ugh, sorry, I can't make it. I have a workout class.
My visceral reaction was, are you fucking kidding me?
No, fully.
First of all, baby, your opinions are aging you about 20 years, but no, Gen Z does not care. We were hired for an annual salary rate that doesn't even cover all our bills and contracted from 9 to 5. So we will be in that office bright and early at 9 a.m. every day, and we will be clocking out at 5 p.m. on the dot. No more, no less. And I know a lot of you with the boomer mindset will come in and be like, Gen Z doesn't want to work. They're lazy. They have no job loyalty. Yeah, are you kidding me? In this economy, we are not getting paid enough to have a strong work ethic, let alone working for hours we didn't sign up for when most of us already work multiple jobs. But yes, hustle culture is over, because there is nothing left to hustle for. Gen Z has watched millennials go through this struggle, and we have learned from them. We listened to them and learned that y'all are just trying to sell us a pipe dream. There is nothing to hustle for, because in this economy, you can't afford anything, especially at the rates these jobs are paying. And two, there's almost no job advancement anyways at these large companies, because the older folks aren't retiring, so there's nowhere to move up to. And of course, that's not boomers' fault. The system is completely busted right now, and retiring is getting harder and harder, and it's going to be pretty much impossible for the rest of us. So if we can't retire, we have to fight to make working livable. And funny enough, I had a job just like this a while back where my boss was a lot like these podcasters. For the whole time, I thought she was Gen X because of her attitude and ideals, but it turns out she was just elder millennial the whole time. But they used to do events for the company sometimes that would go until like 11 p.m. at night, and they would make us work the events. And I remember asking some of the other employees that were Gen Z, like, hey, how does the overtime work for that? Like, how do we fill that out? And they were all like, what? Because they just hadn't been doing that. They didn't even know that was a thing, and I caused a lot of chaos in that office because I knew a decent surface level amount of workers' rights. They were not pleased, but sometimes when we would work super late, then they would tell us not to come into the office till the next day until like noon so we can sleep in, but really they were just trying to avoid paying us overtime. And I was like, no, I'm contracted to work 9 to 5, so I'm gonna be working 9 to 5, and if you want me to work later, you're gonna have to pay me overtime to work those overtime hours. Like, I was already working 2 jobs at that time to afford my bills. They didn't even pay me enough to live. I did not care about your fun little company parties. If you do not care about us, we do not have to care about you. Which is an interesting point because when surveyed, Gen Z and millennials can be bought. Like, many of us will feel loyalty to our company when they're also loyal to us. And of course, a lot of that loyalty often revolves around salaries being fair and benefits and things like that, basic human needs and decencies. But the door has to swing both ways, and when we ask for that, a lot of these boomers or older people say that we're entitled, which is ironic because you're acting entitled to our loyalty without giving us anything in return. So no, actually, it's y'all who are acting with that boomer entitlement. You're not entitled to our loyalty unless you're giving us something. Well, something that's worth something. And a lot of these bosses will get mad like that lady on the podcast and be like, well, why? What are you doing? Do not tell them why. They do not need to know why. If you're not contracted to work then, you do not have to work then. I remember one time I was out sick with influenza, and influenza knocks you out for like a week or 2, right? So I'd been out like a whole week almost, but I was using my sick days. And essentially my boss kept asking me how I was and like pressuring me to come into the office again. Like, she was getting a little bit too sassy and invasive and pushy with it. I was like, I'm literally sitting in urgent care right now. Like, I had to have someone drive me here because I can't sit upright for too long without getting super dizzy. And I remember it got to the point where I just drew a boundary and I said, hey, I can't get out of bed. I'm not coming in. I'm using my sick days. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is I'm not coming in today. Probably not going to be in tomorrow either. And she did not respond to that. She was not prepared for that boundary. And like, fire me if you want to, but that kind of sounds like a lawsuit to me. And this podcaster just solidified her boomer mindset by trying to respond to everyone who was clearly very upset with her take by being like, no, this wasn't like my employee. Don't worry, this didn't happen here. That's not the issue, ma'am. The semantics of whose employee it is not what everyone was upset about. Everyone was upset by your reaction to the situation and your entitlement. But yeah, Gen Zers are showing up in massive waves to fight with the good millennials and Gen Xers to finally put our foot down about entitlement in the office and let you know you're not entitled to anything unless we're getting something too. But then that's not entitlement, that's just like a healthy mutual relationship.
Is Gen Z really difficult to work with?
So, a new resume builder survey of 1,300 plus managers and business leaders revealed 74% found that those people who are 26 and younger tend to be the most challenging to work with. What are some of the top reasons? A lack of technological skills. That one surprised me. Lack of motivation. They're easily distracted, easily offended, and dishonest.
What a bullshit survey. Like, I can't even believe this was a news story. Breaking news. Old people think young people are lazy. Story at 11. Might as well be breaking news. Old man yells at clouds. And I especially like that it said that they're easily offended.
They're easily distracted, easily offended.
Oh boy, you can't even slap a coworker on the ass these days. You can't even honk a woman's boob without the woke Gen Z getting offended. Okay, but here's the truth of the whole thing. Most of these companies would lay you off in a heartbeat if it affected their bottom line, and Gen Z knows that. They might even be the first generation to enter the workforce knowing that. I'm not telling you to be lazy on someone else's dime, but a lot of these companies don't give a damn about you, and it's perfectly acceptable to not give a damn back.
Every week, we all feel it. That 2-day weekend just isn't long enough. You really need an extra day. A day for rest, a day for chores, and a day to have fun, to truly feel re-energized. Enter the idea of the 4-day work week. Gen Z TikToker Gabrielle Judge, who calls herself the anti-work girl boss, recently went to battle with a boomer CEO over this idea, and the response she got was pretty revealing. Judge explained that Gen Z wants a life that is not work-centered, one in which there's adequate time and money to focus on the things that actually matter. Studies have shown for ages that a 4-day work week is one way to achieve this, and the idea is gaining traction in some parts of the world. But surprise, not here in America. When asked by the boomer CEO what exactly people would do with this extra day off, Judge replied with the obvious: whatever you want. But the CEO was unconvinced, and Judge was left to conclude that business leaders and Gen Z will probably never see eye to eye when it comes to the 4-day work week. Which is actually really silly, because multiple tests all over the world have found that 4-day work weeks actually increase productivity, and an extra day off would provide a massive boost to mental health. One recent study found that 89% of workers are feeling totally burned out these days, in part because a staggering 62% of jobs don't even provide a living wage. And that's before we even talk about wage theft practices like so-called quiet hiring, which is promoting or expanding a worker's duties without giving them an increase in pay, that are becoming an increasingly rampant problem. Given all this, is it even surprising that Gen Z wants to usher in what Judge calls a new iteration of work-life balance? The current system may have worked for some generations in the past, mainly because we all bought the story we were sold that success would come if we just keep our heads down and keep working. But that era is obviously over, and Gen Z is no longer willing to play by its rules. Maybe they'll finally be the ones to usher in the overhaul our 9-to-5 system so desperately needs.
Gen Zer in their first internship can't fathom working for the rest of their life.
The original creator turned his stitches off for some reason, even though he asked a question, but I think we need to talk about this because I am a Gen Zer who got her first corporate in-office adult 9-to-5 job this year. And I was actually really excited about it because it was a marketing position in a healthcare company, so I thought it was going to be really great. And I get that the company itself ended up being horribly toxic, but I also made the decision within only 4 months of working there that if I had to do this corporate drone thing for the rest of my life, because I did the math, you couldn't retire in this economy, I just would rather clock out eternally. There were people in their 40s at the company making the same amount of money as me, still in the same struggling to get by position, and I was like, is this is it? This is life? Because I would rather just tap out right now. And I tried to keep pushing through with blind optimism, but it was so soul crushing that 9 months in, I just had to wake up and be like, hey, is this the life you want to keep living? And the answer was no, I don't want to do this. So I had to leave for my own health reasons, ironically. And I've sadly been happier doing odd jobs here and there, struggling to pay bills and just living life and having fun. And everyone keeps asking, what's your plan? What are you going to do? I don't know what the plan is, but I know if I have to go back to that corporate in-office 9-to-5, I won't be alive a year from that date. So say whatever you want about Gen Z, but we're just finally putting our foot down about this corporate lifestyle, where you waste most of your life sitting in an office doing little to nothing. I would rather just get my work done on my time and then get to go live my life. Gen Z, to their core, takes the motto, work to live, do not live to work, very seriously. And if corporations don't start understanding that, it's just gonna keep getting worse for everybody.
I don't want to work anymore. And now everyone who's not going to watch the full video can go comment about how lazy I am, how lazy my generation is, and how we just don't want to work anymore. And now for those that are still here, I will explain what we mean by that. I do want to work. If I didn't work, I think I would honestly probably get so bored that I would just want to off myself. Most of us want to work. It helps give you purpose. It helps give you something to do. Hopefully you do something you're passionate about. Luckily for me, I do something I'm passionate about. So I genuinely like my job. But the problem is the purpose of a job is supposed to pay for you to be able to afford to live. And that's just not the case anymore. People in my generation who went to college, who did everything they were supposed to do, worked hard in school, went to a good college, graduated with their degree, yada yada, got their first job, and they can't afford to live. And we're working 40 to 60 hours a week, on average, and we cannot afford to live. We just do not make enough to pay rent, to pay for food. Everything is so expensive right now, and wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. So we are working full time, giving up a huge portion of our lives to work, and we can't even afford to live. That is why my generation is frustrated. That is why we don't want to work anymore, because we work really hard and we still can't afford to even get by. So what's the point? We can't afford to save. We can't afford to buy things we want. We can't afford to go out and do fun things. We can barely afford to pay our rent and buy food. A lot of us have 2 or 3 jobs or work a full-time job and have several side hustles. That is the case for me. And then older generations just look at us and they're like, you're not working hard enough. This is your fault. You're not working hard enough. That's why you can't get by. The reason we can't get by is because the cost of living since the 90s has gone up 67%, while the wages have only gone up 18%. So wages have not kept up with the cost of living. That is why we can't afford to live. Not because we're lazy, not because we don't work, not because we don't want to work anymore. That is why. That is all. We're also in extreme debt because everything is so much more expensive than it used to be. College is way more expensive than it used to be. Cars are way more expensive than they used to be. Housing, way more expensive than it used to be. And on top of all that, politicians and older generations are destroying our environment, not doing anything to protect it, so we don't even know that there'll be a habitable Earth when we're older to live in. So yeah, that makes us pretty pessimistic and nihilistic and not want to work.
Gen Z doesn't want to work anymore. That doesn't mean they're not working. They are working. They're working 40 hours a week, and they still can't afford to live on their own. This is the difference between poverty in capitalism and poverty before. Poverty before, it was like, I'm in poverty because I'm like unable to work or I'm sickly or something. Poverty in capitalism is you are in poverty because you are working. You are in poverty while you are fully working. They can't afford food and rent and healthcare. These aren't luxuries. These are basic necessities. And hell, who wants to work all the time to not be able to afford things? To barely be able to afford to live? Why do y'all hate workers so much? You are one. I hate to be the one to tell you, but you're not going to get rich. Only 1 in every 1,000 of you is going to get rich. Maybe less. You're not going to Bezos out. I'm sorry. And so all the work you're doing, you're riding for your boss. You're riding for the rich person you're never going to be. And you're stopping workers like yourself from getting a better cut.